He's back. Ousted DNC Vice Chair David Hogg is vowing not to go anywhere, whether the party likes him or not. Speaking to The Hill in the days since being vacated from his role, Hogg suggested Democrats are talking about him because, quote, they don't want to talk about the fact we do have a real problem with comfortability and with competition. And they don't want to acknowledge that the uncomfortable truth, which is we have to dramatically change as a party, and what brought us here is not what's going to get us out.
The party essentially drove Hogg out of the DNC over his promise to get involved in primaries, but that hasn't stopped him. He met with New York City top mayoral candidate Zoran Mandani, who Hogg's group, Leaders We Deserve, endorsed. The 25-year-old activist and Parkland shooting survivor is calling for Democrats who support US intervention in Iran to be primaried, and there's no shortage of reaction. Content creator Candidly Tiff took to X, posting, "Going to ask the same question that dude asked this morning. Do people in NYC even know who David Hogg is?"
And March for Our Lives founder Cameron Kasky, former friend of David Hogg, posted, quote, I truly do understand the David Hogg died for our sins crowd, but this has transparently been a grift since day one, and whether or not the DNC has serious problems does not change that. The vice chair charade wasn't to fix the party, it was to fundraise for the PAC. That's some criticism from a friend of, they were both Parkland shooting survivors who gained some notoriety over that. I didn't know that they had had a falling out.
No, I think that seems to me a little unfair. I mean, we talk about David Hogg on this show quite a lot, and I'm sort of somewhere in the middle in the sense that I think he seems to me an honourable person who has some ideas that I think are good and some ideas that I think are extremely vague. I don't think it's a grift. I think he genuinely believes what he's saying, and of course, given the nature of our political system, someone who believes what they're saying will want to get the infrastructure in place to try to make those beliefs real. I don't think that is inherently corrupt, which seemed to be the suggestion in that tweet.
Yeah, I've become more favorably disposed to David Hogg in recent weeks as I feel his treatment was increasingly unfair, the way he was treated by the DNC. Removing him as vice chair due to the protests of this older Native American woman for explicitly identity-based reasons seemed a big mistake to me for a party that has struggled to appeal to the exact demographic that David Hogg represents, young men. Also, I think David Hogg is right that the party should lean hard just on the politics of it, set aside the policy, should lean hard into being against Iran intervention. That seems like straightforwardly the direction the Democrats should take. Not all in Democratic leadership want to do that, so I thought he was a useful voice to be like, hey, you're going to lose my generation even harder, right? This is something Trump and Republicans could be vulnerable on. There's a split here. A lot of the podcast watching crowd that Trump has overperformed with in the recent election cycle, young men, Gen Z, they hate this. Let's speak to them. Here's an issue. We can try to win them back over. That seems worth doing, and that they were not going to listen to him on that is very telling.
On the DNC point, first of all, myself and our friend Amber Duke were discussing this shortly afterwards, and yes, there does seem to have been a breach of these rather labyrinthine DNC bylaws, but both Amber and I were in agreement. We agree on very little, as you know. We're in agreement that that point was unlikely to have been pressed, let's say, had David Hogg not been so involved in this threat to primary incumbent members of Congress. That's the thing that had that spurred the falling out with the DNC. Now, yes, you can argue that whether it's the DNC or the RNC, its basic job is to get members elected and to maximize the number of people elected. They are not going to take kindly, generally speaking, to primary challenges to incumbents, unless that incumbent is like flagrantly criminal or something. But in Hogg's case, I think he was sort of, he was picked on a little bit.
Ken Martin was like crying on the phone with him because he was so
messing up his
authority.
Yeah.
That was so silly. Did Ken think this job was going to be easy? Right. Did he think it was just going to be a cakewalk? He came into leadership of the Democratic Party at a time of historical vulnerability for the party, where it is out of power in every branch of government and has no obvious Obama-esque unity figure. Has a candidate who was a failed candidate who might run again in Kamala Harris and a bunch of other personalities, major differences in opinion on whether the direction should be more anti-establishment populist in a Bernie AOC direction, whether it should moderate, whether wokeness should be part of its agenda or not part of its agenda. This is a time of where real questions need to be asked. What is the media strategy? And he's crying that it's kind of hard that David Hogg is making his job more difficult. That seems so pathetic to me.
No, I'm not going to take the opposite tack on that. You know, politics is a hard business, actually, and it is a rough business, but you have to be able to do the job and to not crack under pressure. And it sounded a little bit like Ken Martin was cracking under pressure in that case. My issue with Hogg is less whether you should challenge incumbents or not, or exactly the tone in which he speaks. My problem with him is that sometimes I think his actual prescriptions for what he wants are rather on the vague side. So that thing about Iran was at least a specific. Often it gets into this thing of he doesn't like old people except some old people who he does like, and we should protect the ones he likes, and we should vote out the ones he doesn't like, and we need new blood except when we like experienced people because they align with his views on other topics. It all seems a bit convoluted in that respect. But
that's a pretty solid evaluation, honestly, of the Democratic activists.
Yeah, I mean, it's just
more new blood, but also experience, but also some old people are fine, but also some are not.
Right, exactly. And then it's like that is not really a great guiding principle, but you know, it's all a great fight to be had, and it needs to be had. You know, it needs to be had in order to find some new direction. Sorry.
Next up, conservatives blasting the news. See where it says Robby
Yes,
reads, Niall?
I know. I was just trying to get an overreach over here.
Impatient for our next topic. Exactly. Next up, conservatives are blasting the New York Times for what they say is a hit piece on Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy. Stay tuned.